System wrote that song after he had gotten out and had become a musician, and it was in the kind of heat of the Vietnam War, and it was sort of it was about kind of a thing that's still going on today, sort of the real America versus the coastal elites, that sort of divide. It's the same thing. So also very ironic that he has Willie Nelson singing a song whose first line is, "We don't smoke marijuana in Muskogee. We don't take our trips on LSD. We don't burn our draft cards down on Main Street. We like living right and being free." Goes on to say, we don't let our hair grow long and shaggy like the hippies out in San Francisco do. I'm proud to be an Okie, meaning a person from Oklahoma, from Muskogee, the 11th largest city in Oklahoma. A place where even squares can have a ball. We still wave Old Glory down at the courthouse, and white lightning's still the biggest thrill of all. Leather boots are still in style for manly footwear. Beads and Roman sandals won't be seen. Football's still the roughest thing on campus, and the kids here still respect the college dean. I'm proud to be an Okie from Muskogee. So I bring that up because I think it gets at this thing where we tend to see everybody as us versus them. It's a funny song. It's been covered by Willie Nelson, the Flaming Lips, the Melvins, almost every kind of genre you can think of in popular music. But it gets at this us versus them thinking, which still plagues us and plagues kind of every group of human beings on the planet, whether it's sort of little things like sports rivalries or big things like presidential campaigns or church denominations. There's often an us versus them sort of thinking. And it comes up in this song a lot, and it comes up in this reading. So my question for you, who is your us? Whose team are you on? And I say if, but pretty much everybody does this. So for you, who is the us that you're a part of, and who is the them that's on the other side of the line? So turn for a moment with the person seated next to you, or if you're not seated next to anyone, you can move around. But who is in your us and who is your them? Take a moment to chat about that. All right, so bring it back together. Who were some of the us's and who were some of the them's? Who wants to share? Yankees. Yankees are them. I feel attacked right now. Although I was born in Houston and I grew up in North Carolina. I spent a lot of time up north, and I can tell you they are beloved children of God up there. What else? What else? Other us's and them's. I'll go. I often see myself as part of a group of sort of theologically folks who are orthodox in our beliefs and yet less rigid than some other Christian communities. And so on the other side of that line, I tend to see fundamentalists of whatever stripe, whoever they are. But that's my them oftentimes. Yeah. Sometimes it can be silly things. Are you are you a Walmart or a Target person? Um, where do you vacation? Are you a Galveston person or an Aspen person? With these different things. Yeah. What are you, a minimalist, or are you sort of the Texas version of Baroque? Uh, Sort of the more rhinestones, turquoise, and if you have fewer than 50 crosses on your cross wall, you're not doing it right. Yeah, any us's versus them's that you can think of that came up in your conversation? Yeah, Kelly. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we thrift for our clothing, and you want people to sort of know that you do that? Maybe. Some people do. It's very popular with the Gen Z these days. Thrifting is a big deal. Yeah, we can definitely look at the world that way. I don't know if you do this at the grocery store, but sort of what's in your cart versus are you a fresh produce kind of person, or are you a Salisbury steak, hungry man, frozen TV dinner kind of person? Even in the frozen food aisle, there's like the organic section, and then there's the too easy step to diabetes section. There's both, and so you can judge even within the frozen foods. Anything else come up as you talked about us versus them? Nobody said Republican versus Democrat, liberal versus conservative, because nobody wants to bring that up. But that's a huge thing, obviously, kind of politically. But even within those camps, within the Democratic Party, are you more on the Joe Manchin side of things, or in the AOC kind of things? Are you a centrist in that party, or are you on the edges of the party in the Republican world? Are you a John Cornyn, Mitch McConnell, or are you a Mike Johnson, Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of, within these divides? I'm saying all the names. I'm just naming it, y'all. Don't pretend like you don't know what I'm talking about. Where do you get your news? Yeah. Yeah. All those culture wars, yeah, sort of in the question of gender identity and how we, in light of that reality, how do we make decisions about who can play what sports in our schools? And yeah, absolutely. Those are big questions. Absolutely. What public school versus? Yeah. Yeah, homeschool versus private school versus public school, and even within those, there are separate camps. Absolutely. Yeah, we're really good at this. And one thing that, we are supposed to say when we are talking in a way that might be perceived as negative about another group, people will say, quoting Jerry Seinfeld, not that there's anything wrong with that. But we all know that's not actually what you believe. You believe that you are right and they are wrong, and by being right, you are better. There's a value judgment that comes with that. So in almost any, we are people who believe that whatever side we're on is superior to the other alternatives. Otherwise, why would we have chosen that side? And so I want you to notice that. I hope to have turned on the little radar in your brain that sort of, or the listening devices in your brain that will hear these kinds of thinking, that will perceive this kind of thinking. Not that it's something you can necessarily stop, but it's something that I encourage you to be aware of. Because often the views are based on assumptions that may or may not be true. And anytime you tend to see a group of people as a them or an us, you have begun to dehumanize the group of people. I shared this, where did I talk about this recently? I think I was mentioning this at a meeting I was in. about how David Brooks, the New York Times columnist, sort of on the conservative side of things, although these days he would be considered very moderate, nationally speaking, but he's one of the conservative Times columnists, and he was speaking here in Waco at a Baylor event, and he said, you avoid generalizing people. And he had gone on a book tour, and he talked to people all over the country, and he said, the example of this for me was when I met a lesbian biker who had a near-death experience in a plane crash, and after that became a Sufi Muslim. So, let me just blow up all your categories. And she was a Trump voter, right? For the final kicker. So don't, if you think all Trump voters are whatever, or all Biden voters are this, or all Episcopalians are this, and all Baptists are that, just be, so that's an evolutionary advantage. It's an adaptation to sort of see populations in general groups. It takes a lot of brain energy to see everybody as an individual. It's a lot easier and could, frankly, help your tribe's possibility of survival in those prehistoric days when it's sort of our tribe versus that tribe. And we're all good and they're all bad. So that can help you survive, potentially. So it's a shortcut your brain has devised to save energy and maybe increase your survival, but it can lead to really difficult social problems now and divides when we sort of see everybody as us versus them. If you think about, they've done studies that sheep can recognize the difference, these minute differences in the coloration, fur, wool patterns, whatever, ear length. Like all sheep look different to other sheep. But we look at a bunch of sheep and it's just sheep. And we do that with people too. And so the us versus them is something that is going to, we've already seen it creep into the people of Israel in these readings in 2 Samuel. It'll come up in this passage that we read today. It will ultimately destroy the whole project. It'll be one of the main factors that destroys the whole project. And it will be something that is still happening in Jesus' time and something that they're still dealing with in New Testament writings and something we're still dealing with today. And it's something that is always corrosive. There's no successful group of people that lasts a long time if it is based on us versus them thinking. Every sort of successful, long-standing group of people finds some way to get different viewpoints to hold together. If you want to have a purity test, that group will get smaller and smaller and smaller and then cease to exist eventually. So let's jump in, but before I do, so I've whetted your appetite, but I do want to let you know tonight I'll be speaking as we kick off our Lenten Soup Supper. It's something we do every year, these Wednesday nights. We have programming for all ages, so we gather here in this very room at 6 p.m. for delicious soups. There'll be about 5,000 soups that you can choose from in the kitchen, and then we'll come out here and have dinner, and then we'll kind of break up into different age groups, so grandkids, kids, etc., everybody has a place to go. Adults stay here and we have a conversation. I'll be talking about, the theme is of monsters and men, and it's when humans act like monsters and what God might say about that. And we're going to be looking at the very normal and relatable monsters of Seinfeld. And so that's what I'll be doing tonight. And you're welcome to that. It's open to the community and it's a fun thing. The other thing to remind you, we will meet next week, but no class on the Wednesdays mentioned there. March 6th is spring break, and I'll be out of town March 13th. If you have friends in Birmingham, I'll be preaching at their Lenten Noon series at the Cathedral in Birmingham, which is if you're ever in Birmingham in Lent, every weekday in Lent, they have lunch and a preacher from all over. So it's a series they do for the 40 days of Lent, if you ever find yourself in Birmingham in the spring. All right, so let's read. Before that, we should pray. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty God, have mercy on us and help us to read, mark, learn, and inwardly digest your holy word, the scriptures that you've given for our understanding. and our edification. And mostly you've given them that we would know you, and we ask that you use this time today towards that end. We pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. All right. So David has just put down a rebellion. He's come back into Jerusalem. He is reestablishing his kingdom. There's already been some division. The southern parts of Israel versus the northern parts of Israel. The tribe of Judah, which is David's tribe down there in the southern part. So David is now back on his throne, kind of putting things back together after the rebellion was led by his son Absalom, who's now dead. And David is taking the throne again. Now, a scoundrel named Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjaminite, happened to be there. He sounded the trumpet and cried out, "We have no portion in David, no share in the son of Jesse. Everyone to your tents, O Israel." So all the people of Israel withdrew from David and followed Sheba, son of Bichri. But the people of Judah followed their king steadfastly from the Jordan to Jerusalem. Wes, my mic feels a little loud to me. Would you turn it down just a scotch? Thank you. David came to his house at Jerusalem, and the king took the 10 concubines whom he had left to look after the house and put them in a house under guard and provided for them, but did not go into them. So they were shut up until the day of their death, living as if in widowhood. Then the king said to Amasa, "Call the men of Judah together to me within 3 days, and be here yourself." So Amasa went to summon Judah, but he delayed beyond the set time that had been appointed him. David said to Abishai, "Now Sheba, son of Bichri, will do us more harm than Absalom. Take your Lord's servants and pursue him, or he will find fortified cities for himself and escape from us." Joab's men went out after him, along with the Cherethites, the Pelethites, and all the warriors. They went out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. When they were at the large stone that is in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Now Joab was wearing a soldier's garment, and over it was a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened at his waist. As he went forward, it fell out. Joab said to Amasa, "Is it well with you, my brother?" And Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. But Amasa did not notice the sword in Joab's hand. Joab struck him in the belly so that his entrails poured out on the ground, and he died. He did not strike a second blow. Then Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba, son of Bichri. And one of Joab's men took his stand by Amasa and said, "Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab." Amasa lay wallowing in his blood on the highway, and the man saw that all the people were stopping. Since he saw that all who came by him were stopping, he carried Amasa from the highway into a field and threw a garment over him. Once he was removed from the highway, all the people went on after Joab to pursue Sheba, son of Bichri. Sheba passed through all the tribes of Israel to Abel of Beth-Makkah, and all the Bichrites assembled and followed him inside. Joab's forces came and besieged him in Abel of Beth-Makkah. They threw up a siege ramp against the city, and it stood against the rampart. Joab's forces were battering the wall to break it down. Then a wise woman called from the city, "Listen, listen, tell Joab, 'Come here, I want to speak to you.' And he came near her, and the woman said, 'Are you Joab?' He answered, 'I am.' Then she said to him, 'Listen to the words of your servant.' He answered, 'I am listening.' Then she said, 'They used to say in the old days, let them inquire at Abel, so that they would settle a matter. I am one of those who are peaceable and faithful in Israel, and you seek to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why will you swallow up the heritage of the Lord?' Joab answered, 'Far be it from me, far be it that I should swallow up or destroy. That is not the case. But a man of the hill country of Ephraim called Sheba, son of Bichri, has lifted up his hand against King David. Give him up alone, and I will withdraw from the city.' The woman said to Joab, 'His head shall be thrown over the wall to you.' Then the woman went to all the people with her wise plan, and they cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri, and threw it out to Joab So he blew the trumpet, and they dispersed from the city, and all went to their homes, while Joab returned to Jerusalem to the king. Now Joab was in command of all the army of Israel. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was in command of the Cherethites and the Pelethites. Adoram was in charge of the forced labor. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the recorder. Sheba was secretary. Zadok and Abiathar were priests. And Ira the Jairite was also David's priest. Here endeth the gory lesson. Heads chopped off, guts spilling out, all kinds of things going on. Other than that, this is sort of one of the Quentin Tarantino passages of the Bible. What else stands out to you? Questions or observations? Do you have something, Bonnie? No, okay. Yeah, the 10 concubines. Yeah, a really sort of tragic situation. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah. What else? Why the delay? Yeah, so David tells his general, Amasa, to get all the men of Judah together in 3 days, and there's a delay. And it doesn't say why, but we'll talk about why that might be. Good observation, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. There does seem to be some unsaid dynamics between these people. How does the Children's Bible talk about the killing of? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Pretty explicit. Missy, you had a hand up. Has there been a big change in the cabinet? Yeah, there's a reshuffling going on, absolutely. Yeah, it does, because Amasa is essentially the Secretary of Defense, and David put him in to replace Joab, because he's still sort of mad at Joab, because Joab killed Absalom. You know, Joab was like the leader of the military, David's right-hand military guy. David wanted to spare his rebellious son, but Joab said, no, we got to nip this in the bud. Joab, kills him. And David's still kind of upset, so he has demoted Joab in the last chapter, and he has elevated Amasa. And Amasa was, I know it's a lot of names, so remember, David versus Absalom, father versus son. Absalom was the rebellious son, and in his rebellion, he appointed a general to lead his troops, and that was Amasa. Amasa is David's nephew, so his family. Absalom was this was a national dispute, but it was also a family feud. Absalom is David's son. Amasa is David's nephew, Absalom's cousin. So after the defeat of Absalom, David says, Amasa, you can come over to my side. I'm feeling generous and forgiving. You will be my new guy. And I'm demoting Joab because I'm still mad at Joab for killing my son and winning this battle for me, but I'm still kind of ticked about it. So Amasa has now come back into the cabinet. And so that absolutely affects what's going on here. Because you see Joab, by the end of the story, where is Joab? He's back in power. He's now, at the end, you hear him, the text says, now Joab was in command of all the army of Israel. So Joab is now, and we never see him officially get reestablished. He sort of inserts himself into this position, taking it upon himself to kill Amasa, kill his rival, and, possibly settling the score, since Amasa was on Absalom's side. And David is trying to be generous and forgiving and lets Amasa have power, and Joab's having none of it. So he dispatches with his rival, and by the end is back in power. What else struck any of you? Questions, thoughts? Yeah, Suzanne. Yeah. Huge part. Yeah, her name is never mentioned, and yet she's clearly a significant figure in this story. She's in the ranks of people like Hannah and Tamar, Abigail, women who are viewed as less than but speak up and have a really significant role. Mary Magdalene, all kinds of folks in the scriptures. Yeah, she's very important. She's very much like David's wife Abigail when David's about to kill Nabal, and Abigail is able to say, hold up, take a breath. Is this really what you want to do? And she's able to kind of speak reason and wisdom into the situation. And this woman does the same kind of thing. Yeah. Good eyes there. Good. All right, well, let's walk through the text, see what we can see. We begin with this scoundrel. Does anybody have a different translation in verse 1 of chapter 20? Troublemaker, worthless man. If you ever need good insults, the Bible is a great place to go. So this guy, Sheba, son of Bichri, he's a Benjaminite. What does that mean? Does that ring any bells? Who else was a Benjaminite? David is a tribe of Judah. That's important to know because that comes up here. I'll give you a hint, the first king of Israel. Say it, Gandhi. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's Saul. Saul was the tribe of Benjamin. By the way, fast forward to the New Testament, the Apostle Paul. Saul was also the tribe of Benjamin. That Saul before he becomes Paul. So Benjamin is this important tribe. Saul was the first king of Israel. He was the tribe of Benjamin. So when we find out that this guy, Sheba, son of Bichri, is a Benjaminite, it would be quite within the realm of possibility that he's still upset that the tribe of Benjamin is no longer on the throne and the tribe of Judah is. That Saul is out and David is in. And there was a whole thing when Saul died. There was the whole episode where one of Saul's sons wanted to be king and set up a kind of rival kingdom in a different city. And so there's kind of this long-standing, simmering us versus them. Our people were in power, and now they're not, and now David's in power. You know, David, sometimes we think of the Bible, we look at it through rose-colored glasses, and we think of King David and how great he was and all that. And it's a deeply conflicted time. You'll hear people talk in this country, and I've said this before, about what a polarized and divided country we are right now. And it's like, well, we did have a civil war a little over 100 years ago. So I think it's been more divided. But human beings are always like this. It is seeming to be our lot in life. So he's a Benjaminite, and he blows this trumpet. He's sort of like the heckler in the crowd. You know, David, it should be this rejoicing celebration, return to the throne, kind of an inauguration. And we don't want any part of David. He's not my president, that kind of thinking. We have no share in the son of Jesse. Everyone to your tents, O Israel. Now this could be seen as we're going home, back to our houses, our tents. Or it could be sort of a rallying cry, let's go prepare for battle. We'll finish this. And it's actually sort of both. But clearly David, who's trying to establish his reign, reunify the people, it's difficult right from the get-go. So it says, all the people of Israel withdrew from David. Now that means Israel here, we start to see in Scripture, we used to think Israel was the whole kind of nation. It's now beginning to have this term meaning the northern parts of Israel. And Judah will refer to the southern parts of Israel. And then that split will become concrete in a few centuries or decades after the northern and the southern kingdom split. And that ultimately will be where the Samaritans come from up north when Jesus is having his ministry. The Samaritans are the northern kingdom. So that's already beginning to happen here. So Israel withdrew from David. That doesn't mean the whole nation. It means those tribes in the north that were sort of anti-David. And they follow Sheba. But the people of Judah, meaning the southern folks, David's tribe and the people around there, they follow their king. And that possessive, their king. You know, it shows just the factions that are coming up here. They follow their king from the Jordan to Jerusalem. So they go back to Jerusalem. David's at his house, so he's returned, and it's not a happy homecoming. The first thing he deals with are these concubines. Now, it says the 10 concubines, they were the ones that when David fled, went into exile, when he left the capital of Jerusalem because Absalom was taking over, and he didn't want the city to be besieged, so David fled before he could be attacked and killed, and he left 10 concubines in charge. Now, do you recall what happened with the concubines? What happened? What did you say, Kelly? Yeah, so who's he? Absalom. Yeah, so Absalom becomes king, and in full view of everybody, like goes up onto the roof and sleeps with these concubines to show everybody, like, I'm here. I mean, it's very exploitative. It's very offensive. Uh, but in a time when women were absolutely seen as property and had no legal rights to own anything, to conduct business, have any legal standing apart from their husband, they were absolutely property. And so this is Absalom saying, this is my property now. And so David comes home and finds these women that have been it's hard to talk about it in a way that's not awful. It's an awful situation. They're defiled, they're unclean, they've been used, they've been exploited. He can't, and so he doesn't want to kill them or send them out, because if he sends them out into society, they would be pariahs out there. So it's in this system of women having no rights apart from a husband. He can't send them to get their master's degree and begin a new chapter in life as a strong single woman, Sex in the City style. Like that's just not an option. And so the best option he can do is provide for them, send them to a place where they can live, sort of cloistered. It says until the day of their death, living as if in widowhood. It's deeply tragic. Thinking about David's relationships with women, the way he has exploited women in different times, and kind of how this just shows, again, more the brokenness in that system. I will say that one of the things that you see in Scripture, you notice there's no condemnation of this practice. It's not like, and the Lord said, having concubines is bad. And the Lord said, women are equal to men. Like, there's none of that here. There's nothing actually in this entire passage of God saying anything. And by the way, this passage and much of the story, to me, is in complete opposition to the simplistic way folks often see the Bible. Basic instructions before leaving earth, or an instruction manual for holy living. That's how the Bible is described. I don't see any instructions in this. I see a historical account of some significant events of God's people, and it's not a recipe book. The Bible's not a recipe. It's showing God's actions in human lives and what we learn about God from that and what we learn about ourselves from that. So one of the things here in this, where God does not speak, and some people might read that as like, oh, maybe there's some sort of implicit approval of this kind of practice or this kind of patriarchy. And one of the basic rules of Bible interpretation is you never want to interpret one section in a way that ignores the rest of the Bible. And if you include the rest of the Bible, one of the things you're going to see is how Jesus treats women, which is empowering and elevating, and he treats them as fully human. You know that famous story of him talking to the woman at the well in Samaria, the northern kingdom. And the disciples are sort of like, why is he talking to this woman? Because a rabbi would never talk to a woman, because women don't have value. But Jesus absolutely values women over and over and over again throughout his ministry. And so what this shows is God dealing with the people in the culture that they're already in. And the project of the scriptures often is to show how God takes people from where they are and moves them over the centuries. He doesn't say from day one, we're going to get everything in order and make this ancient tribe of Israelites as egalitarian as the people of Denmark in 2024. Like, he has to work with them over time. And so that's what's happening here. And often the way that I think God does this in the scriptures is sort of telling stories like this, that it doesn't end with and therefore the moral of the story is whatever, or and therefore do this, or ratify the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. It doesn't say what you should do, but it does present the situation in a way that emotionally you're like, oh my gosh, This is awful. And it kind of makes you want a different way of ordering society, which then ultimately Jesus will bring about. So, and I think you wonderful Wednesday Bible study people, you are right to notice the significant roles of women in this story. One role that is sort of, the women are put in a position of kind of a very low stature. And this other woman at the end of the story who is elevated and kind of in a high stature. And these things are, I think, significant and show a lot of how we still exist today in many places, but also what God is doing here, even in this one story. If you think that women are just property, who have no standing on their own, just in the same chapter, you're immediately shown an example of a woman who's very powerful and saves her entire town. Like the men are over here destroying each other and wrecking the kingdom, and this woman is the one that saves thousands of people's lives in this city. So there's some irony there, and let the reader understand that God is up to something. So we then have the king calling his Secretary of Defense, his new military guy, Amasa, again, who used to be for the rebellious Absalom. Now he says, call the men of Judah together and be here yourself. You have 3 days to do it. And it says he delayed beyond the set time that it appointed him. So what's David doing here? Why does he want to assemble the men of Judah? To have a prayer meeting? To have a conference on planned giving? To what? Why does he want all the men of Judah together? To go after Sheba. Yeah, he's gathering the troops for a military campaign. And so he says, get all the men of Judah. This shows how limited David's power is. Just Judah. Just his own people are with him. That's all he can trust. We do see ultimately he'll get the Cherethites and the Perethites. These are professional soldiers. The Cherethites are probably from Crete, the island of Crete. Basically mercenaries that were on retainer for Israel, for David, because he didn't have enough. Judah's sort of a small tribe. So he says, get the men of Judah and gather them. I'll give you 3 days to do it. It's not a lot of time, but maybe he can do it. And it says he delayed beyond the set time. Now your question, Sarah, was why did he delay? And the text does not say. There are a couple of options, sort of a choose your own adventure. One option would be he's still loyal to Absalom, and he wants to undermine David. Maybe he even wants to help Sheba so that he can get David out of there once and for all. So it could be an intentional stall tactic that he's using, maybe to give Sheba more time to get his people together, something like that. It could be that he's just there's just a really hard task, and it just takes a long time to get all these troops together. It could be that he's sort of incompetent. Who knows? But he's not getting the job done, and David is getting nervous because David is a good strategist, and he knows the more he delays, the more time Sheba has to get everything together. And note, by the way, David, when he sees that Amasa is stalling, who does he talk to in verse 6? Abishai. He does not go to Joab. Joab's still around, but it just is an indication that he's still ticked at Joab. He doesn't want to get Joab involved. So he says, look, now Sheba will hurt us more than Absalom, so go get him. Or he will find fortified cities for himself and escape from us. Basically, if the more time we give him, he'll be able to dig in a defensive position. It'll be harder to get him, and he'll be a thorn in our side. So they're going on the offense. Verse 7, who shows up? Joab. Joab's back. Now, Joab wasn't told to go out, but he decides to go with Abishai. Maybe he's sort of just around, and David is kind of tolerating him. But he goes out with the Cherethites, the Pelethites, these professional soldiers, and all the warriors. They go out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba. And they're at this stone in Gibeon. It's some kind of landmark. Maybe it's an altar of some kind. And Amasa, who was supposed to be gathering all the troops of Judah, comes out to meet them. At first, it seems like it's going to be a happy reunion. I mean, they both work for David. Amasa is ostensibly in charge. Amasa has Joab's old job, and maybe there's some awkwardness there. Maybe Amasa is a little bit worried about seeing Joab. I mean, Amasa's been promoted, Joab's been demoted. Amasa fought for Absalom, Joab killed Absalom. It's a very awkward reunion. I don't know if you've ever had like the current spouse in the same room with the ex-spouse. It's sort of like that kind of moment there, right on the sidelines of the soccer game. You know, we've all come to see the child, and we don't all agree on everything, and there's some awkwardness in the room. So Joab has planned something. He's wearing a soldier's garment, and over it a belt with a sword in its sheath fastened at his waist, and it fell out. Sword just fell out of the sheath. Isn't that interesting? So what happens when your sword falls out? You leave it on the ground? You got to pick it up. You got to pick it up. So this is implying, sort of winky, Joab now has a sword in his hand because his sword just, the darndest thing, just fell out. So he's got a sword. Some scholars think that maybe he has another sword hidden in his garments somewhere, but I think what this is saying is that he picked up his sword with his left hand because he goes then to greet Amasa with his right hand. This is a traditional greeting, kind of I guess you grab each other's beards and give each other a kiss. By the way, this should kind of remind you a little bit of another time in the Bible when someone is betrayed with a kiss. Anyone want to name? Who's that? Jesus was, betrayed by Judas with a kiss. Yep. So, so when it happened to Jesus, wasn't the first time it happened. So he's very deceptive, pretending like I'm your best friend. Let's bury the hatchet. You know, Amasa might be nervous. Let's let bygones be bygones. Water under the bridge. We're fine. And but with that sword in his left hand, presumably, he's now able to strike him in the belly. Golly. And it says he did not strike a second blow. What is that getting at? If you've been, what's that? He left him to suffer. That's right. If your guts have spilled out, you are not dead yet. You're in enormous pain. You will die. It's an awful way to go. But your heart and your lungs are still working great. You could survive for quite a while like that. And Joab just lets him lie there. Pretty awful. So as we see in verse 12, Amasa lay wallowing in his blood on the highway. There's no mercy killing here. The coup de grace, right? The cut of grace. It's like let me cut off your head so I put you out of your suffering. There's none of that here. He just lets him bleed out. It's sort of awful. Joab, because first he kills him, or strikes this blow. Then he says, then Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba. So they just go take off. They leave him there. Back to the main task. And Joab's men says, hey, if we're all on Team Joab and for David, let's go follow Joab. So the crowd has now made Joab kind of back in charge. And then we come back. And so the troops are off marching, and Amasa is just here on the highway, just left for dead, like roadkill. And so they're kind of rubbernecking. You know, when you see a wreck, you want to see what's happening. They see this guy, they look, and it says they all are stopping as they go by. And so this guy says, okay, we need to remove this distraction. He finally gives him a little dignity in his death, carries him into a field and covers the body. And so now people can move ahead. I think this is not just a random detail. I think this shows some of the ethos that has crept into the military here, the House of David, kind of as Hamlet said, there's something rotten in Denmark, like there's something rotten here, like the fact that Joab would do this in this way, that he would show so little mercy or compassion on his relative, that he would let him die in such a cruel way. There's something, Joab is a very effective leader in some situations, but you do feel like he's becoming a little unhinged. He's determined to settle every score. He seems a little bloodthirsty. When he killed Absalom, who's stuck in the tree, they have him throw 3 spears into him. I think 1 would have done the trick. Here, Joab is letting him just sort of suffer with his guts on the ground. So there's just there's something kind of not right. When a culture becomes really bloodthirsty, again, that's a sign of some rot from within. Whenever somebody cheers for the death of someone, whenever somebody kind of glories in the pain and the suffering, there's something kind of not right, which is why I can't watch the John Wick films, like with Keanu Reeves. It's just, they're popular, they're dramatic, heart-pounding, suspenseful, exciting, and John Wick is killing like 40 people a minute. And there's something very gladiatorial about that, like liking the blood sport in the arena. And I think there's something in there that is, shall we say, not close to the heart of God. And you see that begin to get into this situation here. Potentially. So the question is, could David have arranged this kind of in the back rooms? Possibly. I mean, that's an interesting theory. The text doesn't say. And what's interesting also is how absent David is from this story. You definitely get the sense that David's star is fading a little bit. He sent these people out to do this work, and he's clearly not managed the relationships well, because Amasa is failing. He sends Abishai to do it. Abishai steps back for his brother to really take the reins, and David is seen as somebody who's just not managing this very well at this point. So who knows? Maybe he has put him up to it, but we don't know. So Sheba goes to Abel Beth Makkah. So that's Israel. It's the Mediterranean Sea there on the left. The Jordan River I've highlighted. So you can see how it runs from the Sea of Galilee in the north down to the Dead Sea in the south. And Jerusalem there at the bottom of the Jordan River. And the Sea of Galilee, obviously that whole region where Jesus had most of his ministry. And I've circled up at the top Abel Beth Makkah. I can zoom in up there. It's way far north. It's like the northernmost region. So, this whole story, David's down there in Jerusalem. So to go all the way up to Abel Beth Makkah, this is a long trip for all those troops. The Judahites and the Cherethites and the Perethites, all these folks going up there to attack. It would have taken a long time to get a whole army up there, and to get the supplies, to build a siege ramp. So all these cities are walled cities for defense, and to get up to them, you have to build a lot. You have to move a lot of dirt up there to get up to the top of the city. So this story reads very fast, but we're talking months going by here, weeks at least. It's a long thing to do. So Sheba is in there, in this village. So it makes it sound like kind of he ran to Abel Beth Makkah, got in there, closed the door, and was like, "Whew, I'm okay." And then you hear David's troops knocking on the door. No, it's going to be a long journey and a long time. So he's in there. So everybody in Abel Beth Makkah knows exactly what's going on. He's been in there because he's got his troops in there. The Bichrites, they're all in there with him. So, and they've been in there for a while. So it's not like, so when this lady comes out, they've had a long time to hang out with Sheba. He's been in their town, and they've probably been sort of fretting about what to do, and probably pretty sure that David's troops were going to come get him. So there's been likely lots of discussion about this. So Joab's forces arrive. Again, interesting in verse 15, we're now calling them Joab's forces. We're not calling them Abishai's forces or David's forces. These are now Joab's forces. They besiege the city. Anybody ever been to Israel here? Anyone? Any people? Missy, you've been? Did you go to Masada? Does that ring a bell? It's not a site that's named biblically, but it's an old Jewish defensive stronghold, and you can still see Roman siege works built up against it that are still there, these kind of giant dirt ramps up to the side of Masada. So that's what's going on here. And they also have this battering device, apparently, to try to break the wall down. And then we have this woman, I envision her kind of coming up with the wall. Hey, listen. kids, get off my lawn sort of situation. And she has this plan. And she kind of, after the sort of, here I am, I'm listening, whatever, what's the first thing she mentions in verse 18? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Abel used to be this place, this city that's being attacked used to be a place where we would settle our things in a civilized manner. It was a place of wisdom. And look, here we are just trying to, use brute force. And so she's got a historical perspective. I think that's often important. The people that want to go off and, charge, ready, fire, aim, that kind of attitude sometimes lacks a historical perspective. And she has the historical perspective. And she has a good knowledge of herself. I'm a peaceable and faithful person, she says. You want to destroy a city that's a mother in Israel. What this means is that the mother city it's got little daughter villages around it, sort of little suburbs. That's what it's saying. We're an old city. We've kind of grown, and we have these little daughter communities around us. And this is the heritage of the Lord. This is the inheritance that God has given to his people. And you're going to destroy it. We're destroying each other from within. Just stop. And so Joab kind of has this, oh my gosh, okay. I don't know if you've ever been in the heat of anger and something causes you to stop. When those pathways start in your brain and those hormones and all those kind of neurotransmitters get released, and the momentum is just carrying you forward. People talk about crimes of passion or doing something in a fit of rage. That is absolutely a reality. And once those dominoes start to fall, it's really hard to stop them on your own. The momentum picks you up and carries you, and something else has to come in from the outside to stop that. And that's what this woman does. She kind of is able to grab him by the lapels and say, Joab, wake up. And he you get the sense of him coming to his senses. He is actively trying to destroy the city. There's a battering ram at the wall. There's a siege work up to the side of the city. And he says, far be it from me. Like, oh my gosh. It's like, as I'm stuffing the second bear claw into my face. Like, far be it from me to carb load. And so he goes now into sort of justification, which is often what happens when we find ourselves doing something that we never thought we would do. He says, I would never do this, except there's a situation here with this guy, Sheba from Bichri. He's in here, and he's going against King David, so that's why I'm doing it. He could have sent an emissary at first. He could have sent somebody to kind of negotiate a little bit, but he's gone straight to the most extreme level. So he says, now, let me... just give me Sheba, and she one-ups him, says, I'll do you one better. We'll just cut off his head and throw it over to you. So that's what they do. And it says, the woman went to all the people with her wise plan. And so they cut off the head, throw it out, Joab blows the trumpet. And by the way, this is absolutely a callback, sort of a bookend, because what did Sheba, son of Bichri, do in verse 1? He blew the trumpet. So it's sort of a signal like everything, like the karmic circle has come back around. He started this by blowing the trumpet, and now look what happens, how the turntables, he blows the trumpet, they all go to their homes, and Sheba's head is on the ground there. Joab returns to Jerusalem to the king. And then we end at verse 23 with this description of the cabinet of David. We've got these different jobs. So this is kind of the epilogue of the story. The story is now completed. Now we're back. We've kind of settled this difficulty with Sheba. And we get this description of who does what. We've got a kind of someone who keeps the records, somebody who's in charge of the enslaved labor, somebody who is the secretary, the priests, and also this guy Ira, the Jerite, who is David's priest. Probably like a chaplain to David, kind of a friend, counselor, advisor situation. Do you have a question, Carol? Yeah, where is Abishai? Yeah. Abishai now is fading. I mean, he'll come back, but yeah, this is sort of indicating that Abishai, now that Joab has reasserted himself, Abishai has just sort of now been, I don't know, he's less important. So a couple things just to note, kind of the highlights here, I would say. I would warn you against the danger of settling scores. Sheba wants to settle the score of Saul, the Benjaminite. Joab wants to settle the score against Amasa. There's just all this kind of quid pro quo, eye for an eye, tit for tat sort of stuff. He started it, well, she provoked me, like that sort of thing. And just note how that cycle never ends except in more death. It doesn't really win. I tried to show you this video last week. I think we've got the technology worked out. To me, this is just a humorous clip about settling scores versus Christianity.
Do you believe in... No. Do you believe in getting even?
You mean, do I believe in revenge?
Yes.
I definitely believe in revenge. I absolutely believe in revenge. Which people always say revenge is, a dish best served cold, it's better. It's good anytime you get it. Any chance you have for revenge, take. Never let that pass you by. I do. I believe in revenge. I don't believe in forgiveness, however. It might be ethnic, because forgiveness is a Christian thing. I mean, forgiveness, in fact, is Christianity. That's what Christianity is. I mean, everyone was Jewish, then came Christ. He said, I'll forgive you. Oh, well, they all went. Naturally, it's a much bigger religion.
So Fran Lebowitz gets it. Public intellectual, great writer, thinker, but she does get it. She understands, I think, Christianity better than many Christians do. Many Christians think Christianity is a way to modify your behavior to get success in life. But that's not what it is. Christianity is forgiveness. That's the whole point. And she gets it. And so I think one of the things you can see in the story we read today is just if your whole life is about settling scores, you will end up in these difficult situations. So part of that is the persistence of us-them thinking. Beware the us-them thinking. And you begin to see Jesus work very directly against this, quite intentionally. That conversation with the Samaritan woman at the well, the one I mentioned earlier, where he was sort of elevating her by treating her like a human being, somebody who could talk with a man. She says to him, your people worship in Jerusalem, on Mount Zion, where the temple is. My people worship on this mountain, Mount Gerizim, and, we have this big debate, and you say you're right, and I say I'm right, and all that, and Jesus says, look, God is not, he doesn't care which mountain you worship on, which side is right. God is looking for people who worship him in spirit and in truth, meaning there's some bigger thing that should hold us all together as opposed to this mountain or that mountain. And so you see it in Paul's letters. In Christ, there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, but all are one in Christ. This is the sort of mind-blowing thought that goes against all human activity. We draw these lines on a map, and then we say our country is better than your country. And there are differences in countries for sure, in places I'd rather live than other places. But all of that is sort of a human project of us-them thinking. It's not what Jesus is driving us towards. And you see the kind of us-them thinking here that is pernicious. As I said, note the roles of women in the passage. Really significant. God is moving people along from the kind of situation that would have concubines who, after they've been used and exploited by first David and then his son, the only solution for them is to go be put basically in a convent, never to see the light of day again, and live like widows. And they have no choice in any of these situations. They're completely stripped of all agency and power. And yet contrast that in the next breath, this city in the north, and how she demonstrates the humanity, the power, the chutzpah of women to speak to this very powerful, bloodthirsty man and to save his behind from sort of this ruinous situation. And I think the story does more showing than telling, but to me this indicates something that God is up to in this story, which of course achieves its highest point in the ministry of Jesus Christ, in the way he treats all people and especially women. Jesus is often described as proto-feminist, which I think is a good way to describe it, in that he treats women, as fully human beings. That's what feminism is. It's sort of a dirty word in some situations. It's a word that some people like or don't like, but a quick and easy, accurate definition of feminism is the radical idea that women are fully human. And that's something that the Bible, it doesn't begin there. Well, it does begin there, absolutely, in Genesis 1 and 2. But then the division and the hierarchy comes later as a result of sin. The man and the woman are made in the garden as equal. Eve is taken from the side, not from the head or from the foot. They're equal. And it's the brokenness that results in the hierarchy. And you see this brokenness throughout until Jesus, in sort of recreating the new Israel, the new people of God, the new Eden, all of that, you begin to see women established in their role with men as kings and queens of the country of heaven. Like, that's the whole idea. That's the whole project. So you begin to get a hint of this here. And then finally, beware the theocracy. Theocracy is a government where it's based on religion. People talk about the U.S. being a Christian country, and certainly Christian ideas were a big factor in the mental framework of the people who created the country called the United States of America. Some were Christians, some were definitely not Christians, intentionally not Christians. If you ask them, they specifically rejected the teachings of Christianity. But anytime you have a country where religion is the dominant thing, it messes it up. Look at any country with a state church, a state religion that's enforced by the government, and nobody goes to church. And also, it begins to make people think that how they feel about the entity that goes to war, that enacts taxation, all those sorts of things, that God is wrapped up in that somehow. It gets very messy and very muddy. And you see that God warned them, don't form a theocracy, don't get a king, don't do this whole project. Human beings continue because we don't know our own history or the history of the Bible. We think that if we get a nation state that's based in religion, as long as it's our religion, it'll fix everything. But it only makes the problems, I think, muddier and harder, and it's just a real mess. So I am a firm believer in the separation of church and state. And if there were a good way to put them together, maybe I'd support it, but it's just never worked. The situation we have also has its problems, but I think I'd rather have these problems than the other problems, where the nation has to act on behalf of God. It gets really, really messy. So, final thoughts, questions, comments? All right. Well, that'll wrap us up, and we will see you next week. Let me say a prayer. God, help us where we have us, them thinking. Help us to see it all as us, people made and loved by you.